Right, hi everyone. Thank you so much for agreeing to join our panel today. What I'll do, if that's okay, is allow you just to introduce yourself and maybe a little bit about you, just for a couple of minutes so that all the people watching know who you are and from what lens you're talking from. Now, obviously, Nasa, we've already heard from you, but if some people did have a few technical issues at the top, they might not have heard all your introductions, so might be best to just introduce yourself again. So if I can just start, I'm just going to go literally from where I see my screen, if that's okay, in terms of navigating for us. So Nasa, could I ask you to just introduce yourself and say a little bit about yourself?
Thank you. Well, those of you who were lucky enough not to hear me first time, here it goes. I'm Nasser Siabi, Chief Executive Microlink. We're based in Chandler's been here in Southampton for 35 years. I studied in Southampton, got my doctorate in electronics and computer science, and I work in the field of disability, helping disabled people within the workplace and in the higher education. So that's what I've been doing for 30 years.
Thank you, Nasa. Pavan, I'm going to come to you.
Thank you, Kerry. My name is Pavan Lal, and I'm BAME Population and Workforce Programme Lead currently at Hampshire and Isle of Wight Integrated Care System. I've worked in Southampton for a good over 12, 13 years. And my whole field has been in the NHS around inequalities, whether it be population, health improvement, inequalities, kind of the public health arena, or I'm currently a workforce race equality standard expert as well in the system. And that's about tackling workforce inequalities as well. So that's kind of my background. And it's lovely to see Ruby here because I was on the Stepping Up programme and she was one of the wonderful facilitators. Lovely to see you, Ruby.
Okay, good to see you too, Pavan.
Thanks, Pavan. Joe, I'll come to you next.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much for the invite. I'm Joe Teap, Chief Operating Officer for University Hospital Southampton. I think those that I've been here 2 years, and those that know me will know I'm I've just started my journey about understanding diversity in health and care, even though I've been a director of NHS trusts for 20 years now, but probably only the last 2 years since I've been here have I really given it proper deep thought and how I can change and adapt to support the agenda. So yeah, I'm a bit of an apprentice compared to these other panel members, but really keen to learn and listen from you all.
Thank you, Joe. And I think Joe is a massive supporter of us, so absolutely has a equal place at the table in terms of this agenda. So thank you, Joe. Ruby?
Hello, thank you for having me here today. My name's Ruby Ubi. I'm Associate Professor at University of Birmingham, where I work in the space of healthcare leadership, and I'm the Managing Director of Maha People, a boutique consultancy that works with leaders within the UK and across the world, actually, in spaces of leadership, development, and also inclusion from the perspective of how can we get the best out of our people at work. I've had the privilege and joy of working with a number of leaders at UHS over the years as part of inclusive leadership programs, and I've also worked with quite a few participants, including above and on national programs, the NHS Leadership Academy. So I do a lot of work in the NHS, that's where my career started, and also work with leaders in the private sector as well as the charity sector too. I'm really glad to be here.
Wow, what a panel. So you know me by now, I'm Kerry Connor. I'm the Director of OD and Inclusion at UHS. Not been at UHS very long, only since July, but what an awesome organisation, and love working across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. I've worked in Southampton, I lived in Southampton a long time, so really, really pleased to be hosting today. So what I would suggest is that we have a discussion between us, and I'll try and support people wanting to come in and out. I'm not sure we have hand up options here, so I would just say if you want to come in, just raise your hand or some way of letting me know. Obviously, we've got everybody available to talk and share thoughts in the chat, people that are watching the panel won't be able to share their screens. So if you want to interact with the panel, please put it in the chat, and I'll do my best to try and navigate questions that come up. Obviously, I won't be able to bring in every single question, but I'll do my best to try and bring in as many as possible. So if I haven't brought in your question, please excuse me. So our panel topic was very broad on purpose, so we could see where the discussion goes, and it was equity versus equality. You know, can we have one without the other? And I guess it would, for me, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking, what do those terms actually mean, and do everybody understand that? So it might be good to start there in terms of the differences between equality and equity. Does anyone want to give their first thoughts?
I can come in first. I mean, to me, equality is to give everyone the opportunity to show the best talent. And that also means you have to give certain people not unfair advantage, but extra provisions to create a level playing field. So by that, you get the best out of that individual, and you get the best for the society. And so we don't need to elevate somebody to a level because there are some legal or society requirements to look to be fair. What you do is you give the right opportunities to individuals to shine, to work on their strength rather than try to hammer them for their weaknesses. And that's really how you can not only achieve your equalities and the equities, you also get individuals who are motivated, loyal, and they can actually give back something to society.
Thank you, Nessa. Anyone else?
I think Dr. Oh, sorry, supposed to put Dr. Nass's pictures just kind of said it all, really, that he showed in terms of the fence and the difference between equality and equity, and it really is about, as he said, you know, distributing resources according to need, and ensuring that everybody could shine really and thrive in their roles.
Thank you. I'm in agreement in terms of distributing resources, opportunities based on need. However, for me, I feel equity is an enabler for equality. So equality is the same for all of us. Equity is recognizing that the need's different. And for me, in terms of my own perspective on this field as a woman of colour, and also as a person who works with a lot of leaders with diverse characteristics, is recognizing that I love that picture. I think the picture, if I can kind of, I haven't seen it, but I think it is the one with people who are different heights trying to look over the fence. I think that's a really helpful way of recognizing need. However, from my perspective, I also think it doesn't recognize the complexity of the need, because actually you could have people who are the same height looking over the fence, but actually there's one person who probably can't, based on things like societal discrimination, inequity. So it's not based on, oh, let's help the person who's shorter have a few extra blocks to look over the fence. For me, it's recognizing why can two people who are the same in terms of their height or their ability, if we're talking about this from a work context, not have the same opportunities. And I think it requires leaders and organizations to have some quite painful and challenging and uncomfortable conversations about how some people in society and organizations are offered advantages and opportunities just based on their character or how they were born.
Yeah, the thing I would sort of add to this, I think one of the things that I've learned sort of by listening to colleagues and through the Inclusive Leaders Programme, I think was how important equity was sort of to achieve true sort of equality. And I think they felt that equity was a more powerful, you know, in the EDI strategy, that actually it was equity that we were searching for, not just equality. And as you sort of study this further, of course, you then have the link into diversity and inclusivity, because by promoting sort of equity and equality, you're on that spectrum of also therefore people feel a sense of belonging if their individual needs are accounted for. And of course you sometimes need that, you know, more positive affirmation to achieve the diversity in the workplace that we certainly need. And I personally don't think we're very good at tailoring our services and for our colleagues based on individual sort of needs. I think there's a lot of work for us to do that, to truly achieve equity in the workplace.
Yeah, agreed. And I think, Ruby, your point is made so well in terms of how we address that kind of understanding of individuals, and how we really, you know, learn about people and their whole selves, not just the people they are at work. But how do we? What's your experience in supporting leaders across the world, as you said, in terms of that, helping them to do that?
For me, I think it's recognizing that this is part of our work as human beings. This is part of our history. It's not just part of an organizational initiative or the next trendy thing for leaders to talk about. If we look at this historically, in the UK, we have got a history of British colonialism and slavery, and that has impacted how people have seen and experienced themselves within their home country, as well as impacting how groups of people from different cultures across the world have come to the UK and developed new communities and developed their identity, actually. And when we look at that globally, so this week I was doing some work with leaders in Asia and Africa, and we couldn't have a conversation about what was going on in their organisations without looking at African history, without looking at South African history, and without exploring what are our people carrying with them as they come into organisations, and how are we playing out those historical dynamics through the way we work, through the way we connect. And to Joe's point, it is about conversations and getting to know people's stories. And your point, Kerry, this is relational work. It's about relationships, and relationships in all areas of our life, I think, can be very beautiful and brilliant, and can also be really challenging and require us to do some real deep work. And some of that is pain. I think you can't get belonging and joy. I do a lot of work around belonging and joy in organisations. I don't think you can get to a place of joy and belonging without recognising the pain and the isolation that some people are feeling, and the exclusion. And that's not just people from marginalised groups. It's also people from the majority. I've worked with a lot of white middle-class, middle-aged men around some of the shame and pain and guilt that has come with recognising some of the advantages they have been afforded. So for me, achieving that is working with people in all groups, and recognising what damage exclusion has done to all of us, so we can heal together and really create belonging and joy.
One of the things that, Kerry, if I could sort of come back on that, in that I think by having sort of those individual conversations, you realise, or I realised when I sort of searched out 30 colleagues with different backgrounds, and realised how uneducated I was about some of the issues that Ruby has described. But also from, you know, I would say that I don't think I've ever really experienced sort of inequality or inequity. I think I've been very sort of privileged, and therefore as a white sort of middle-aged manager in the NHS, it's really hard to work out what meaningful action for me sort of looks like, in that I can talk about it like now and I can post in sort of blogs, but how do you really sort of make that leap so you're really making a difference to our colleagues that we work with and the populations that we serve? And I think that's really difficult, actually, to find. I've got a list of things and you can get yourself trained and a bit more clued up, but how do you really make meaningful action? And I think as an organisation, we're searching for, you know, meaningful action and not just sort of words.
Oh, we'll go with Pavan first, and then Nasser, if that's okay.
Thank you, Kerry. So it's really about involving and including those people and asking them what one meaningful action looks like to them as well. There are staff networks in our trusts. There are, you know, listening groups, safe spaces, understanding and drilling down into what communities and our work communities find or would like is a really good place to start. You know, what would make a difference to them, and how then do you go about creating and achieving that difference in order to meet their needs? Because a one size fits all approach won't work, and it has to be tailored accordingly. So it's about being brave, having those honest conversations and listening, active listening, in order to take those next steps, and then action, because there are so many reports, there are a plethora of reports going back years and decades, and actually we have seen that some of those actions, or quite a lot of those actions, haven't been fulfilled. So people want action. They don't just want talk and more reports. They want to see what's happening as a consequence. They want to see change.
In my view, it's really lack of recognition, identification of talent. I mean, we as a nation, we're great. I mean, the UK is absolutely by far the most embracive country in the world when it comes to diversity, and you know the cultures in this country is unparalleled anywhere else in the world. I can tell you that because I was when I came here, I was 15. I had a disability, and I became overnight a refugee because my home country, Iran, underwent through a revolution. So I stayed here. So I came from a working class background. My father never went to school. He had big dreams for me, but certainly with my disability, there wasn't much hope of me ever getting anything done back in Iran. When I came here for medical treatment, I started from a very low base when I went to college with no English as the first language. I couldn't speak the language. I couldn't do the sciences. But there was a teacher who recognized I had the talent to do science instead of waste. So he helped me from the very basic levels. So I got my doctorate in computer science and solid state physics at the age of 28, 13 years after arriving as somebody who'd failed in all sciences and quite frankly would have been wasted by any society. I managed to get to where I want just because somebody recognized I had the talent and he put me through that. In this country, I don't believe people deliberately discriminate or want to stop somebody progressing. They just don't understand what they need to do with a person who has the talent, or they don't even know how to identify that talent. So I think as employers, as planners, we need to find a way of finding out the right person to do the right job. It's not about elevating anyone to the lowest incompetence. We actually want to make sure everyone who comes to a work can do the work as best as they can, and the progression will come based on the outcome and the results they deliver. And then you lose the color, the religion, everything else. But the trouble is, how do we train our managers to recognize this? Now we can use technology to recognize who's the best person for a particular job. It's just clever algorithms and AIs can identify how good you can be in one certain task, which means you get to do your job applications and job advertising, not make it so wide that no one can tick the boxes unless you are from a certain background. Make sure you actually ask specific questions about the kind of skill set you want, and then you become quite blind to everything else, whether it's the background, the race, or the education. And that is where we need to go back. We need to identify the right talent. That starts from our school, and it goes from the university and goes to the workplace. And once you do that, I'm afraid, which we are not anywhere near there, then you end up finding a much fairer society where people are rewarded based on their own abilities rather than the traits and the kind of strands of whichever background they've got from minorities.
Ruby.
Thank you for sharing part of your story, Nasir. It's really inspirational to hear in terms of what you've been through and what you've achieved. And for me, it's taken me back to secondary school and primary school, actually. I was fortunate to have some really brilliant teachers that nurtured my individuality as well as my talent. So I didn't feel as though I had to fit in or perform for my teachers. And I've been doing some reflection. Why do I do the kind of work that I do? And some of it has taken me back to thinking about some of my school teachers and how they saw my talent, they nurtured it, and they allowed me to be myself. And I think one of the challenges in organisations is that there can be a lot of campaigns around recruiting diverse, different people into organisations, but there isn't enough work around culture. How do we create the conditions in which these people who are different from the norm flourish, that they feel valued, that actually they can show up to work and be themselves? They don't feel as though they have to squeeze into a mold. And what we know in lots of sectors across the world is when organisations are reactive and we get different people in, but we don't change the culture, organisations don't retain those people. And it's actually quite damaging in terms of the stories that are told or the feelings left behind. So for me, yeah, how do we value people as individuals? I love that you brought in class, Nasir. I come from a migrant working class background. I don't think we talk enough about the pain of social mobility and how people shift into different social groups. And I've worked with lots of people in organisations who say have come from a working class background. However, the way they behave doesn't connect with people from working class backgrounds today. They don't often tell their stories in terms of this is possible and you can do this without compromising who you are or feeling you have to behave in a different way to fit in to middle class, upper class circles. So I think that's a key part for me. And the prevention is really important. There's lots of work in the NHS, particularly around anchor institutions. So recognising your role as part of your community, your role as part of society. The last cohort of Inclusive Leaders programme at UHS, we had groups of your leaders who were connecting with your schools, who were thinking about local communities, and who were recognising that actually it's the experiences of our people walking into the hospital that can influence their day. If they experience racism on the way into work, is going to impact how they feel at work. So I agree. I think it's how do we step back and look at the broader picture and think about how can you nourish and nurture young people as well as working with the situation of talent right now. And without taking kind of too much airtime, I agree. I think algorithms can be really helpful. However, we need to make sure our algorithms are inclusive as well. So there's lots of evidence and data that's showing a lot of algorithms are actually exclusive because of the people who've created them. We haven't got the right people around the table, and we experienced that in the pandemic around GCSE results as well. So,
I think there's got to be a separation, distinguishing between data science and brain science. You use brain science to identify the talent, and data science is what people use the past history, which could have been already tainted with bad data. However, really, I need to emphasize this issue of talent. 1 in 5 of our kids in school have neurodiversity. The current education is so badly designed that they just not get through it. They struggle. Even if they get through it, they have to work twice as hard as anybody else. NHS is full of those who struggle to keep up. Yet if they had the right support, they were given the right jobs, or they were given the right training, they could excel. They could incredibly improve their situation. So you won't have so much strain on the system. And we do know this happens at every stage of get them filtered out. We got prisons filled with people on neurodiversity that will never get another job, because basically the past and the future is interlinked. What do we do with them is we just carry on plowing more money into keeping them in prison, yet we could actually go back and look at the education and skilling and trying to make that work. Every year, 60,000 disabled students from universities graduate with a degree that they couldn't do without the support they get, the extra support. I'm really proud that I have been part of that for the past 30 years. Nearly 300,000 students have graduated with our support because I knew I could do it. Everybody else can do it. I've achieved what I have done because I know I had the intelligence. I just didn't have the support or the recognition or the opportunity. That's what we need to give people, the opportunity, and recognize what they can do. Forget about what they can't do. Help them with the things they can do. Let them improve. And I think then, as I said, you'll find people are more embracive, and they will accept it, and they will support to bring more talent into the organization, and they will make sure that they actually progress and shine through.
I think we need more role models as well to talk about their stories, so it inspires others to come forward and try and reach that top levels, and to try and influence culture, because that's where you will get the best, as we've been talking about, you know, allowing people to thrive. Let's get the culture right within the teams, as Ruby mentioned, but let's get people talking about it. Nasser's journey that he very kindly shares, totally inspiring, is amazing, and we need more people to talk and share their journeys. You know, growing up in East London, you know, we weren't a wealthy family, but at the end of the day, you know, my dad even then used to say to me, you have to work twice as hard. You're going to come across barriers in your life. I carry that, and I know other colleagues do. I mean, I co-chair our staff network at local trust, and I hear stories there. The struggle is very real, even to get to the next level. And in fact, the data is showing that as well. We just need to look at our RES data, WDES data. We just need to look at the recent disparity ratios that have come out from the National EDI team. People are stuck at certain grades. That's what the data is telling us. So what is it we can do about it? How can we create that talent pipeline? I certainly haven't experienced a talent pipeline in my years in the NHS. It's what I've had to do, or how I've tried to navigate the system. But how can we change that culture now? And it's about retaining staff as well, as Ruby said, to enable people to feel like they do truly belong.
Absolutely, and we know that we have got so much operational pressure, and workforce is one of our biggest risks in terms of sustainability. So you know, we've been scrutinising, as I'm sure all organisations have, our data recently in terms of leavers and retention, and you know, we do fairly well in the main of in recruiting, but it is absolutely about what is the workplace that they're coming to, how are they developed, how are they supported, how are they enabled to thrive, in order so that we can keep them either within our own organisation, but you know, help them thrive across the system that they work in, so that they can then stay, because we invest so much in recruiting people and invest so much in that part of the process. We need to get better at investing more in the other part of the culture. Heavily invested in that, obviously, in my role, but it's just, I guess, helping others to understand that importance, and particularly when, so I think about, Nasser, what you were saying around pressure of, you know, how organizations work and how that really disadvantages people, you know, in terms of struggles they may have or obstacles they might come over, particularly when we're moving at such fast pace and under such pressure. You know, it feels so difficult for leaders to be able to, you know, give time and space to stopping and pausing and speaking to people, and being that sponsor, and you know, enabling that just discussion about how are people and what do they need. You know, what are your thoughts on how we come across? Joe, maybe as an operational leader, sorry, Nasser.
No, please, afterwards.
As an operational leader and your experiences with current pressures, you might have a view on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things from that discussion. Firstly, I wanted to say the role models, I think, is really sort of important, and we end up with sometimes the willing few that sort of step forward either to challenge issues or to role model issues. I think for us, you know, if I could say maybe with gender, there's an issue in terms of perhaps we need to sort of encourage and you know, make sure we've got coming through more very senior female leaders, for example, and the female leaders that are willing to sort of put their heads above the parapet and be those like role models and challenge our behaviours sometimes can be quite few. So we need to work out how to, and it's partly linked to culture, isn't it? A good culture and a supportive environment means that we'll create more sort of role models. I've also found I've generated a lot of benefit from this reciprocal mentoring that we've done. And in fact, I've searched out and found some other colleagues to work with me on reciprocal mentoring, and I've learned so much from that. And in my language now, I'm so careful to say that I'm not mentoring somebody, because actually they're mentoring me. I've learned so much from those relationships about different sort of cultures and backgrounds and experiences. And so I sort of positively aim to search, if I go to awards now, I will positively aim to search out a diverse group of sort of colleagues. Obviously colleagues that know me know that I'll go and do sort of porter shifts, and I've been out with the sort of waste guys, so I try and do a lot of sort of walking in others' shoes. And in our sort of day-to-day lives for all of us, I think it's very hard to have empathy with colleagues if you haven't sort of had those lived experiences, but you can make progress on that journey by trying more to live in the sort of shoes of others that we're trying to support. So I think there's lots of things in terms of there's lots of things we can do, and lots more we could do to encourage greater diversity within our organisation. And frankly, we need to, in that if you go for a run around Southampton Common, there's in the summer evenings, there's a wonderful sort of array of colours and people and cultures. And then you can come to work into the senior management meeting and have a completely different, sight of that. And so we do need to do much more, I think, in terms of positive action to create more diversity within our organisation, particularly in our senior roles.
There are lots of areas where I think improvement needs to be made. It's not one particular place. One of them is confidence is hugely important for women or any other minorities or the diverse group to believe they can do it. And that is one of the issues. I'm sure with intersectionality comes into play here, where many more women than men suffer from disabilities or health condition in middle age area. Most women do feel because of that condition, they are unable to go to the next level. But they just literally will give up because they don't get the kind of a recognition, the support they need during those times. And they feel that obviously I will be a burden. And I have spoken to many women, very talented women, who simply give up. Now that is a senior management's role to recognize they are the people who could actually save us from the abyss that we are expecting with all these perfect storm we're having, which is, we've got the Brexit, a shortage of staff. We've got people after the COVID with mental health and physical health, as well as the long COVID. And on top of that, the pressures of life, the inflation going out of control. How on earth are you going to manage that unless you actually start working with your workforce, giving them confidence they are able to do the job, and the senior management to actually recognize they are the ones that actually going to save you the money. Don't ask for more money from the government. If you're hemorrhaging money, keeping people out of work, the same people could actually relieve the pressure on other colleagues who are struggling. That's where you need to do your investment. And by that, provide those support, mental and physical support they need. Going back to education, I have heard, and as I said, two of my nephews and nieces in the hospital doing their medical degree. A fourth-year student dropped out because of ADHD. He was on medication. He couldn't come to lectures on time, and it was a bright lad, but he was just forced to leave the course. 4 years investment is gone. That kid is going to make it in life because he's intelligent, but what a waste, what a loss to this NHS. There are lots of examples like that where lecturers don't understand the inclusivity of education, teaching the kids the way that most of them will understand the subject better. And those kids underperform, underachieve. So we really need to look at all aspects of it, and hopefully slowly we could make improvements in lots of areas.
But can I just add to what Nasser said, is also the impact of that individual dropping out and then that person may succeed, and would have to be really resilient then to go forward and keep trying and trying again. And imagine all the knockbacks that individual will then have in going for a job, being understood, etc. And those are the same challenges felt right the way across our protected characteristic group populations. And, you know, in terms of race, in terms of discrimination and racism felt institutionally, systematically, it's the weathering effect. And that's the resilience of that. You have to keep battling over and over again. And some people just choose to disengage. I mean, I've spoken to a couple of people who have said, no, I can't do any more of this. And they've left the jobs because that's enough for them. They've battled for too long. So what we have to change that, because we are losing good talent. Medically trained, non-medically trained people are leaving because of how they're being treated. We just need to look at kind of staff surveys, discrimination being faced, racism being faced by you know, communities. People are leaving because they can't take the ongoing onslaught of this, of the microaggressions and the other aspects. And we've got to change that if we truly want to retain people, and also reputationally for the NHS, because people talk, communities talk. It's hard, but you know, people do talk, and we want to get this right so that people really want to come into the NHS.
I think that's a really good point, Bevan, around how people feel when you've been excluded. It's exhausting. So the conversation around building confidence, which I think is well made, is kind of actually complex, and recognition that you might need support to help connect with or reconnect with your confidence, because of things that are outside of your control, not because you don't have the talent or the skill. It's because the systems have been devaluing who you are as a person through the way they work, the way they operate, and it is tiring. And to your earlier point, Bevan, and I know it's kind of Joe and Nasser agreed, stories are really important. And we also need to think about the kinds of stories we're telling as well. So the stories around the pain and the exhaustion and the exclusion are really important. But actually people sharing those, if that's a disabled person, a woman, a person from the LGBTQ plus community, sharing that story again and again reconnects them with trauma and pain that they have experienced. So I think it's being mindful of what we ask of people in terms of what they share. And let's share some strengths-based celebratory stories of people who are different. Let's show that you can make it. And also let's make space at the leadership table for them. There needs to be space for them to move into, which means that there needs to be an adjustment of power. And I think those are some of the tricky and needed conversations that need to happen in organisations. How do we adjust the balance of power here so that people can have a seat at the table?
I'm going back to senior management level decision making. I employ 60% of my workforce are disabled, and they've been with me. The longest employee I've got has been with me for 26 years. And the loyalty I've got from them is all because we cared about their situation, and they care about me, and they care about my customers. So my approach to my staff, and I interview many of the people I recruit myself, because I don't ask them about their experience. I don't ask them about their background. I say, what can you do, and how can I help you to do it the best as you can? That's really a simple question, but it means a lot. It means that I recognize every person has a unique talent and is good at something. How can I get that, and how can I amplify that? And I think within the NHS, you've got such brilliant people from all over the world. Would they make it to the top job? Maybe not, because maybe the system is designed, not deliberately, to score them on maybe the past working experience in which other trust universities you worked in. Not here. Okay, so you don't score, you don't go up. Then yet those people could actually make such a big difference to the entire NHS or to the nation's health. So I think we need to actually start focusing still on what people can do and how can the NHS help them to do it better. whether it's disability, whether it's race, whether it's religion, they can offer something unique. Motivation comes from care and the kind of love they get from their employers. If you invest in them, they will invest back in you. So I think the problem could be easily resolved by asking people, what can I do for you to make you feel welcome and to do better? And I think people will tell you. And then the change is quite easy. It's definitely very cheap. It's not going to break the bank because you're wasting a lot more not looking after that kind of aspect than if you were to do it properly.
Thank you, Nasir. I'm just noticing in the chat, and we've talked about it as well, about systems that really don't. We know that systematic change is needed to move culture and to move how we work every day forward. But the systems that are around us really appear to be preventative of us making real significant gains in this area. And I have a particular issue with the way that the NHS in particular sets up its job profiles and its job descriptions and its person profiles, which, you know, already excludes a whole heap of people before you've even started recruiting. But there's a load more systems that we work around. How do we, trying to change that just seems so hard. And I think a lot of people, just noticing in the chat, you know, people saying people leaving, you know, people knew about it, but no one does anything. Or, you know, what do you think that we can tangibly do to try and change some of the systematic barriers that we have around us?
I think
my learning from working with private sector, commercial, global companies, the senior managers, the senior directors and execs have recognized it actually is good for the bottom line, full stop. We get more productivity, more profitability. In an NHS context, we get more work out of our teams, out of our workforce. And changes, I think they know what the changes are, but maybe sometimes there's a cultural laziness in organizations. Let's not fix it. Let's not tamper with it. It's working okay, so we might break it. No, you have to actually be brave. Unless you try new things, you're not going to improve anything. So the old saying, you know, doing the old ways and expecting a different outcome is not going to happen. So, and one thing else, the public sector is not very good at is actually failing. They don't want to fail. So in the fear of fail, they won't actually try to improve. And that's where we need to go back and look at both education, both our intake of students in our training, as well as our progression within the sector. We need to actually try new ideas. The ideas, it's getting too late not to. That's my point. It's not no longer you could sit back and try the old methods. Problems are more complex, so you need creative people to help you, and all the diverse range of people you have will help you with that. You've got to involve diverse people into your new planning for the future, and I'm sure you'll get much better outcomes than we currently have.
So we have 1 minute left. Ruby, I'm going to let you.
Super quickly, I agree. I think it takes courage, it takes bravery, it takes being innovative and doing things differently. I think from my experience, a lot of the fear of failure in the public sector is due to the connection with politics and the impact that changes has on local communities. And I think we need to consider that complexity as part of the broader culture. I think all people and leaders need to do some deep work around what are my biases, what are my assumptions, and through that deep work, then approach systems and be radical, change them, do things differently, and also recognize that our biases are part of being human. So how can you help people and leaders once they've recognized their biases, they're working with them and they're changing systems? How can we put nudges into place that help people sustain that change and make more inclusive decisions? So I think it's a multi-pronged approach that takes lots of love, kindness, and it's messy, it's relational work. So we need to make it okay for people in all groups, the majority group, the minority group, to make mistakes and say, hey, I might get this wrong. Let's work through this together.
Thank you so much. I wish we could talk more, but we've run out of time. So thank you for everybody interacting in the chat. Lots of insight and food for thought there. Thank you all so much for being so honest, sharing your stories and being vulnerable so that we can all learn more. So I really, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kerry.
Thank you.